All right, I'm gonna start off with an illustration, or yeah, we can skip that. Supposedly in Japan, I'm not sure how accurate it is. Haruka could fix me if I'm wrong. In Japan, there's supposedly a monument like this of three monkeys that covers eyes, nose, mouth, and supposedly it's located. I didn't write it in this sermon. I wrote it somewhere else. It's in one of the shrines, and supposedly it holds a major theme. Do you guys could sort of guess what this theme is about? What do you think this message is trying to tell us? I mean, we know it a lot. We heard it a lot, right? I hear mumbling. Yeah, hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil, blah blah blah. I was like, that's fun. I like it. I remember I used to be taught, don't do that. Like we're taught that in our Christian message. I'm like, I wonder which message came first, blah blah blah. But regardless, I found out that this thing had a name, and it is Sambiki no Sara, which literally just translates three monkeys. But if you're going deeper, it's three wise monkeys. It's the idea of that your eyes, your mouth, and your ears have very big potential of helping or hurting you. And so with that, I was like, okay, I find this interesting. Let's see how I could relate that with the Bible message that I did. And I looked through my QTs that I've done on my Bible reading. I'm like, oh, there's a passage in the Bible that talks something about that, but just focus on the eyes. And I found out that this passage connects to one of Jesus' many messages in the Beatitudes or the Sermon on the Mount. With this, so with that, I was like, okay, let's see which out of those three diagrams I could connect to. And I found out that for me, I found that the eyes was a very interesting factor, interesting concept to talk about. So today, my sermon is going to be focusing on concept of the eyes, which is why my sermon is called the eye factor. So with the eyes, I found out that the Beatitudes had, as some of us know, the Beatitudes is actually just a passage of many, many good messages in the Bible that God shares with the people of Israel, telling them this is how you need to grow, this is what you need to learn. I have a lot of good messages to share with you. And so with that in mind, I thought, this is why I chose this passage. So in this passage with the Sermon on the Mount, I found that there were a few passages that I liked the best, and these are just a few that I remember that stood out to me while I read the passages of the Beatitudes. It's found in Matthew chapter 5. First one is verse 3, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Verse 4, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. There's two more. Verse 5, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And verse 8, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Knowing how there's so many passages in the Bible, when I read passages, I usually ask these three questions in any passages that I read. Who are the characters in this passage? Where is this story taking place? And thirdly, I always ask, what's going on? And with that, we always know who are the characters. And actually, with that, I came to a conclusion that when the audience that Jesus spoke to during that time were a few of these things. There were Jewish families, Jewish shepherds, fishermen, publicans, teachers of the law, priests. And I just realized also, just because Jesus was near the Jews doesn't mean there were only Jews, there was also Gentile. There was a huge audience that came to listen to Jesus when he spoke at Mount Olive. And I was like, okay, now why are they there? And I realized that some of these people were there for multiple reasons. There were some people who were there just to hear a wise teacher share lessons that they could learn and to grow themselves with their personalities. There were a few that just came to observe and see that this guy was in trouble, like the teachers of the law. They wanted to make sure this guy wasn't cause a riot. There were a few others that just wanted to come see him because they heard so many profound things about this speaker that shares a message and moves people's hearts. With a lot of this, they came to see Jesus, and with that sort of with a certain type of background, we're just going to go into my Bible text. That was a winded introduction. I apologize. We'll be now jumping to my main passage, Matthew chapter 6, verses 22 and 23. And I believe I have that ready. Here we go. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? When I read the passage, and again, connecting with the eyes, I was like, what can Jesus say back to 2,000 years ago? And I came to two understandings while I read this and did my research. So let's just dive in. Let's just dive in here. I found that there was two understandings. One of them is that the meaning of the eye being the lamp of the body could have been both literal and figurative. In the literal sense, I found out that we could talk a little about the organs. I pray there's no ophthalmologist here because they might crucify me. I'm just saying with the base of what you see here. The eye is a fascinating organ. For an organ this small, it has multiple functions. There's the cornea, iris, lens, the retina, the optic nerve, and that whole space in between. And just with that simple organ, it allows us to actually see, right? Without light, you can't see. So it was literally figurative. If there's something wrong with the cornea or the iris, you can't see. For some of us, we're living proof. I wear contact. Without contacts, I'm very blind. I can't. If I took my contacts out right now, if you look in the back, we have our main vision statement that Hilltop is committed to create a church for the unchurched. I couldn't read that from here. That's how bad my eyesight's are. So going with that, here's a few diagrams. There's the normal vision means that the eye and the lens make sure that the light hits right at the retina area so that you can see properly. If you have myopia, that means the lens is squished so that the light can't reach it properly, so you have short sight. If you have hyperopia, that means that you have far sight because the light passes your retina. This is why we have the lenses to help correct. And then the astigmatism, I didn't research that, it was just on the diagram. With the organ in our eye, there's multiple things that happen, and I just lost my control of my program. Sorry. Regardless, there we go. And so there's a lot of things. So literally when Jesus was talking, the eye is the lamp of the body, I said, oh, that's obvious. And of course, people saw that that was very, very important. And I thought before, I've actually skipped a passage in my sermon. I found that the reason why also the light is also very fascinating is not just because of all this function that it does. I found out that in the retina area, it has a lot of very sensitive cells that helps us see. There is the rods that are in the retina. There is something called the rods cells that help control the low and high contrast. If you guys are good at guessing, how many cells do you think are in that area? How much cells are in the rods in the back of the eye? Give it a guess. It's in the millions. 10,000? Nope. Yeah. 200, a little less. 120, close. And then if you go with the rods of the thing that controls the color, gives the color scheme, there's about 6,000 to 9,000. Sorry, not thousand, millions. So you find out that with these sensitive cells, this allows us to see color, to appreciate stuff to appreciate the things in our lives. And I'm so grateful that God gave us eyes that we could see. And so I was like, okay, that's obvious. God was talking about the good and the bad. Going with this, I was like, okay, that's good. Now let's see where the figurative goes. In the figurative concept of it, I found out that the eye being the lamp of the body, it really just means that what you observe usually sometimes portrays in our actions. And I'll give you guys an example. When I was young, I loved this TV program. I loved watching this. And I remember this and some of the Kung Fu shows that were younger. I think it was like with Jackie Chan. I love watching this. I only realized that when I look back at this, after I watch it, 10, 20 minutes later, my brother and I will be like, let's pretend we're Power Rangers and we'll just imitate what we just saw. And then if I watch Kung Fu, after a few minutes, I want it to be a Kung Fu. If I watch the fireman, I want it to be a fireman. So I was like, oh, okay. The eye is very important because what you observe is what literally just makes us imitate. Because I bet everyone, you guys are nodding your heads, I bet you've seen stuff when you were younger, and even now, when you observe it, you're compelled to imitate it. Because sometimes it's cool, some of them is not possible, but you find yourself, you're just naturally inclined to imitate. And so when Jesus was talking about the eye being light for the body, it made a lot more sense to me. I was like, okay, God wasn't just talking about literally physically, but he was also talking about what we observe. Going with that, I was like, ooh, this means I have to be very careful what I watch. And I remember when I was younger, my mother would say, don't watch certain shows. And I was like, why? Right? That's our favorite thing. Why? My parents would be like, it's bad. I'm like, but why? It's so much fun. I'll give so many whys and whys, but only now did I realize if any of what I just said is true, I was like, oh, this is why sometimes it won't be the best idea to watch certain shows. I recall, I recall just like even a few years ago, I looked through the available TV program, I looked at some of the things and I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't let my kids watch this or even my friends watch this. It's not the greatest thing to watch. And it just made me realize it's not just TV, but there's other things in our lives that could possibly hinder or affect the way we live our lives because of what is seen. And going with that, I think this is why one of there's people that literally say this: "You are what you see," and this made me realize I have to be very careful of what I allow into my eyes. We have to be careful because at times I remember also when I was younger, I used to believe, no, I would not be affected by people around me because there's certain things I wouldn't do. I remember, I don't remember. I bet when I was younger, there was people who did drugs, who drank near me. I didn't let that affect me. So certain things didn't, but I found that the TV affected me a lot. There were other times, but then at the same time, on the reflex side, I found out if I'm around good people, I reflected their actions too. So it wasn't so bad. So I was like, okay, this is all very good, and so it made me happy. And so, like, remember what I said? Who said wise things about the eyes first? I'm not saying it's Shakespeare, but he said something very great. The eye is the window to your soul. And that also made me realize that the importance of the eyes, of why we need to always be very careful of what we let in, because anything could affect our eyes. It could be like again, TV. It could be people around us. It could be the what else? Yeah, like the TV, people, um, things that we read, things that we listen to, and so the monkey concept was very, very good to begin with. Yes, going with that. Let's go with this. Enough of talking about the outside influences. Christ, knowing that there were also influences that could affect their eyes, he actually mentioned a few things that were also very important to keep an eye on while we're growing up. And you could find this in the verses before the main passage that I shared. In Matthew chapter 6, is verse 19 to 21, it says this: Do not store for yourself treasures on earth, where moth and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourself treasures in heaven, where moth and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Reading this, I also found out that Christ was using that as a setup for the eyes of what it meant to have our eyes in. And you could see on verse 21, it says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So in a sense, when you're looking at treasure, you usually observe it, you find it very pretty, you find that it makes, it affects your life, and you find out that it does you very well. But at the same time, you find out that when you have things that come into our eyes, it usually starts taking up space that where Christ lets us take space in our hearts. And you find out that makes it very hard. Christ even explained this even further on verses 24 afterwards. Here, this one I'll catch up with. Thanks, Ivan. No one can serve two masters. Either you hate one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. I remember when I read this, I'm like, that's not true. We could balance both. But when you look at this, Christ wasn't just talking about that it was easy. He was just using that as an example to tell us that there are things that affect our lives, may it be a physical essence in our lives or a figurative essence that could affect our lives and in our bodies. Going with this, I also realized this. The reason why Christ used treasure was that it is a one thing that everyone could relate to. Remember how I said at the beginning of my sermon, the audience that Christ had were publicans, teachers, children, farmers, of Gentiles. Everyone could relate. We all realize that we need money to survive, even now. Without money, we can't have a car where we could drive and commute to get to work. If we don't have money, we can't further education. If we don't have money, we can't put clothes in our bags. If we don't have money, we can't even have a room like this where we could worship God. Money is not such a bad thing. But at the same time, sometimes people focus so much on money to help ourselves feel a little bit comfortable that we find out that diverts our eyes from Christ. And Christ was saying this could be a distraction. With distractions, Christ made it abundantly clear that what distractions would do. If you see this, you could sort of know which direction I was going with. One time, Christ made a mention before: it's easier for a camel to go through an eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. I remember this. And I've heard a lot of interpretations of this. Some people, I like to say that it was an eye of a needle, like literally an eye of a needle. Other people said the eye of a needle was a figurative thing that back in history, when people lived in towns and cities, there's a wall, right? There's a huge gate. At night, they close the gate, and in the big gate, you don't want to keep opening and closing at night because it could affect the defenses of the house. So what happens is that there's a small door that I believe will only be like maybe 5-6 feet tall that people use to pass this way at night. And so they were saying, this is what it means to be an eye of a needle, because people want to make it relatable, that it is difficult to get to the kingdom of heaven, not impossible. I just like this analogy because the idea is that without God's help, you can't. And so that's just me expounding. Going with that, you find out with the concept of the eye of the needle, with the camel and the rich man, it's the story of the rich young ruler. This man couldn't give up his wealth. We don't know why, but he just found out that wealth was priority number one in his life. While I'm saying all of this about how treasure is bad, money is bad, I just have to not end with this, I have to put a little side note. Wealth isn't all bad. We know that, for example, Solomon did well with his wealth. His wisdom helped him gather money. It made his kingdom expand. So it's not such a bad thing. Even Abraham did really well. God blessed him multiply for serving him, and Job did it well too. So money in itself isn't bad. It's just that what becomes priority, and so we need to do that. So talking about all this money and eyesight, I think a lot of people be thinking, I can see a lot of people rolling their eyes at me. They're like, Matthew, how does this apply to me, right? I don't have time. I'm a student. I don't have time to watch TV. I can't let that affect me. Other people be like, I'm a student, or I just graduated from med school. I have loans to pay off. How can money be a priority? I'm not just talking about how money could be a hindrance to our eyes. Let me continue. Other things that could become hindrance in our lives are this, and I don't say this lightly. I'm just using this as example. Anything could become a hindrance in our eyes. Sometimes some of us put family above other things. Some of us put education above other things. And I just had to put a cell phone because that's my idol. We have a lot of things in our lives that could cause us to stumble and to deviate and just take more time away from God than is needed. Because I truly believe with all my heart that we need to have God in our lives constantly. But I find out that with my life, I'm like, God, I know you're important, but I know you're always there. So let me focus on other things too. Because like I said, if you look at these individuals, it's not a bad thing. Family is important. We are created to be social beings. Family is not bad in itself. I truly believe education isn't bad, because without that, I wouldn't have a job here, or any of us would have jobs. And I think that technology is also very great because it helps us communicate with things. A lot of things aren't bad. It's just that at times, those things become priority number one, and so we need to balance. We need to be careful with that. So knowing with that balance, I would just like to, I have two simple solutions for those things that might come if a hindrance with our communication with God, and it's this. Here are two ways to help minimize these things that might that might become a distraction between us and God. First thing that we need to do is this. Sorry. If you find that this item consumes a lot of time, you want to cut that time in half a little bit. Because as I was growing up, I found out that technology and the computer took a lot of my time. Half of it was for education, the other half not so much. But we know that it does. For some of those things that we need in our lives, we just have to cut it in half, just slowly, gradually. Is it easy? No. I'm a walking textbook of it. If I was good at managing my time wisely, I think I could do a lot better. There are some other things in our lives that we might have to eliminate completely. I'm not going to tell you what it is in your guys' lives or in my life. I have no right to tell anyone else what you need to keep and not take. But I truly believe if any of us took time to slowly reflect, we know what things that we might have to let go, what things we might have to reduce to help us connect with God. Because there's a reason why God needs to be the center of our lives, and that is clearly stated in this Bible text, John chapter 8, verse 12. Christ says, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." I think we're all here. Like I truly believe with all my heart for people who do believe in God, who don't believe. I believe we seek for acceptance. We all seek something to extend our lives. I think there's a reason why a lot of times reincarnation, um, finding a way of longevity is in our DNA because we want to live longer. Because who wants that? There's a lot of things, and Christ is telling us here's a way to do that. Going with this, going with that, I'm almost very close. I have actually application number 2 for this. The reason I like to mention in our thing is this. I was talking so much about focusing on God, that people might think, I believe that there's other things that we need to do. Us as Christians who are here at Hilltop today, I believe we shouldn't just focus on God coming into our hearts or to our hearts through our eyes, but I believe that we need to also become mirrors for God. For us as Christians, we have the honor and the privilege to have known God and experienced Him through our lives. May it have been less than 6 months for our whole lives. We've all experienced God, and sometimes when you have that, I think it's natural for us to try to reflect that. And so I want to add another application with the concept of the importance of the eyes. We take our time to read their Bibles. We take time to socialize, to understand that God loves us. And by understanding this, I believe it's our right to reflect God. And this is why I like this one. I believe it's very important for us to not just absorb light, but to reflect it, because it's our job as Christians to do that outside of here. No matter any sermon I want to give, I always like to but I like to always encourage the Great Commission. Our job is to share God's word. And our job, honestly, we cannot produce our light ourselves. We know that light comes from God. And for us, when we accept God, we need to learn to reflect it. And I would like to plead to Hilltop, please become people that reflect Christ. I'm not saying we have to be perfect. I'm not saying that we need to be like those people that we consider saints. We're human. I know that we have flaws. But I believe that each of us could portray little bits of God that's in our capabilities. Because I believe all of us have family members that love us. So if we understand love, we can love other people. That's another reflection. There's people that are compassionate. You could reflect compassion. Each of us could show a fraction of God to other people, and this is a way to help. I believe this is a way to help other people to see God and create a relationship with Him. Going with that, I'm gonna end with my illustration will end my sermon. And everybody knows what this picture is. It's a very, very one of the well-known pictures. It is called The Last Supper. And little kids, let's see how good you guys are with art history. Do you know who drew this? Isaac, Joseph, Alyssa. Do you know who drew this? It's the same guy who drew Mona Lisa. No? Okay. We all know who it is. Leonardo da Vinci. He drew this. And I remember a lot of pastors use this as a sermon. There's so many sermons, picture illustration we could learn from this. I've heard of stories of where Da Vinci drew this and the guy who was a model for Christ and Judas was the same guy. I heard other stories of how it took 4 years to draw this because Da Vinci couldn't have an inspiration. That's not the story I want to talk about. I heard of a story illustration of this that you can't see the effect of it, but it was just very interesting. Supposedly through history, it took about between 3 to 4 years to draw this. When Da Vinci was very close to finishing this, supposedly he called a few friends to help to look at this picture and give him feedback. Let me know what you think about this. Tell me what inspiration you get from looking at this picture. And so when he called a few friends, the friends came to look, And they all said good things. Oh, the picture's nice, the colors are great. But the one thing that they all said constantly was this. It wasn't that they were talking about how great the 12 disciples and Christ was. They kept focusing, supposedly, next to near Christ's hand, there was a chalice. You know how when Christ, at the Last Supper, he passed a cup of grape juice or wine around for people to say, remember, this is my blood. They kept mentioning, ooh, we really like the silver chalice in the middle of the picture. The video is very sad because as we all know, what's the focus that the Last Supper is supposed to be on? This picture, what is the focus supposed to be? On Jesus. But his friends kept talking about, oh, that chalice, that silver chalice looks so amazing. Supposedly, Da Vinci, when he heard that, got really sad. He got paint and he blotted over that silver chalice because the focus was not supposed to be on the cup, but on Christ. So going with this, the importance of the eyes, talking about the three wise monkeys, I found that the correlation of everything was this. What is our eyes focused on? What is our eyes receiving? Because all of that is very fundamental in our growth with Christ. And so that will be my conclusion. And I would just like to just ask this question. Are your eyes on God? Let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Gracious Father, this sermon didn't come out as smoothly as expected, and I apologize, but I hope that something resided in people's hearts today, the idea of importance of what they prioritize in their lives. Lord, I know from personal experience that even with my privilege of being a pastor's kid and being a minister myself, there are certain times that my eyes is a downfall for my spirituality, and I know that how difficult it is. But Lord, regardless of what could possibly become obstacles in our lives, we ask that we truly learn to focus on you. And thankfully, it is Easter so that we may also focus more on you. Lord, I hope that as people continue enjoying lunch and continuing with their lives, that they learn to prioritize you in their lives. Because I truly believe with you being the center of our lives, I think it could become much better and we could become much happier. We love you, Lord. In your loving Savior's name, amen.